She was worth $3 billion, dressed in $40,000 of silk and lace, and she was crying so hard she couldn't breathe. The man who heard her through a closed door wasn't a guest, wasn't a friend, wasn't anyone her world would have counted as important. He was the driver. And in the next 4 minutes, he would make a choice that changed both their lives forever. If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The morning started the way most Wednesday mornings started for Noah Bennett, with cold coffee and a missing sock. He found the sock behind the radiator, drank the coffee anyway, and checked on Chloe twice before she told him to stop hovering. She was 8 years old and already tired of being hovered over. He didn't blame her. She'd been telling him the same thing since she was 6. "You're going to be late," she said, not looking up from her cereal. "I'm not going to be late." "You said that last Tuesday and you were late." "That was a different kind of late." He grabbed his jacket off the chair where it had been since Sunday. "That was traffic. This is me being on time and traffic making me late. Different." Chloe looked up at him with an expression that belonged on someone much older. She had her mother's eyes, that particular shade of dark brown that saw through everything, and sometimes it hit him sideways when he wasn't expecting it. "Mrs. Okafor says excuses are just explanations that didn't work," she said. "Mrs. Okafor has never driven the 95 at 7 in the morning." He kissed the top of her head. She smelled like the strawberry shampoo she'd insisted on buying at the dollar store 3 weeks ago and had since declared too childish. He dropped her at the corner where she met her friend Destiny, watched until they both disappeared through the school's front door, then got back in the car and drove to work. The wedding was at 11. He'd known about it for 2 weeks. The venue was St. Philip's Cathedral, which sat at the top of a hill on the east side of the city, like it had been placed there specifically to remind everyone below that some people live differently. The parking structure alone cost more to build than the apartment complex where Noah rented his 2-bedroom on the 4th floor. He knew this because someone had written it in a magazine article that he'd read while waiting outside a restaurant for a client 6 months ago. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since, though he couldn't explain why. His assignment was to handle overflow transport, guests who needed pickup from the Harrington Hotel 3 blocks away and couldn't be troubled to walk, or who'd flown in late and needed rides from the private terminal. Routine work, stand and wait work, the kind of job where the goal was to be invisible and reliable in equal measure. He arrived at 47 minutes past 8, which left him over 2 hours before the ceremony. The cathedral's event coordinator, a narrow-faced woman named Sandra, who communicated exclusively through a clipboard and a headset she never seemed to actually use, walked him through the schedule without making eye contact once. "You'll be stationed at the east entrance. Guests arriving from Harrington get walked to the north transept. VIPs get walked to the room adjacent to the vestibule. Don't interact unless spoken to." She finally glanced at him. "You've done this before?" "Plenty of times." "Good. Stay near your vehicle until called." He stayed near his vehicle. The morning was cool and dry, the kind of October weather that almost apologized for the summer. He leaned against the Lincoln and watched the flowers go up. White roses by the truckload, unloaded by a team of 4 who moved with the mechanical efficiency of people who'd done this 100 times. A florist barked at one of them about hydration tubes. A photographer tested angles on the cathedral steps, crouching and standing and crouching again. A man in a slate-gray suit paced the sidewalk with a phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped sentences that carried the unmistakable cadence of someone managing damage. Noah watched all of it with the detached attention of someone who'd learned that the margins of other people's important days were actually where everything interesting happened. By 9:30, the guests had started arriving. He made 3 trips to Harrington and back, shuttling a retired senator and his wife, a group of 4 women who spoke exclusively in a language he didn't recognize, and a man in his 70s who sat in the back seat and narrated his own memories of the bride, as though Noah had specifically requested them. "Vanessa was always the sharpest one in the room," the old man said. He was speaking to the window more than to Noah. "Even at 12 years old, used to argue with her father at dinner. Not just argue, she'd win." He shook his head slowly. "Howard Sterling deserves every bit of this happiness." Is that her father? Was. Passed 3 years ago. He paused. She doesn't talk about it much, but she built everything after he died. All of it. Like she was trying to prove something to someone who couldn't hear her anymore. Noah didn't say anything. There wasn't much to say to that. He dropped the old man at the north transept entrance, watched the event staff receive him, and drove back to the east side. He first saw Vanessa Sterling at 22 minutes past 10. He'd seen pictures, of course. You couldn't work in this city without knowing who the local billionaires were. And Vanessa Sterling had been on the cover of 3 magazines in the past 18 months. But photographs had a way of flattening people into something decorative, and the woman who walked out of the bridal preparation suite on the second floor and onto the balcony overlooking the inner courtyard was not decorative. She was present in a way that photographs couldn't hold. She stood at the railing in her wedding dress, full white, long train, the kind of dress that required help just to turn around in. And she looked down at the courtyard with an expression that Noah, even from 40 feet below, could read clearly. She was not happy, not pre-wedding nerves, not the ordinary anxiety of someone about to walk in front of 300 people. This was something else, something that had already happened to her, something she was standing on the other side of, trying to figure out what to do next. She noticed him looking. Their eyes met for 1 second. She looked away first. He told himself it wasn't his business and went back to waiting. At 10:41, Sandra's voice came through the radio clipped to his lapel. "Bennett, bride's preparation suite, second floor, now." He didn't ask questions. He went inside, took the stairs to the second floor, and followed the corridor to the room marked with a small placard that read bride. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again, softer. "Ma'am, I was asked to go." "Who sent you?" The voice from inside the room was controlled and tight, the way voices got when someone was working very hard to keep them that way. "Sandra at the event desk. I'm one of the drivers. My name's—" "I don't need a driver. Tell her I'm fine." He should have walked away. That was the job. Be invisible. Be reliable. Don't push. If the client said they were fine, they were fine. And if they weren't fine, that wasn't his problem to manage. He didn't walk away, because he'd stood outside a door like this before. Different building, different year, different woman, but the same quality of silence on the other side. The silence that wasn't peaceful. The silence of someone trying to hold something together with both hands while it fell apart anyway. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear what's happening in there," he said, quietly enough that it didn't carry down the hall. "But I'm also not going to push. If you want me to leave, I'll leave." A long pause. "What did you hear?" "Nothing specific, just the way it sounded." Another pause. Then the sound of something being set down on a hard surface. Then the door opened. She was still in the dress. Her hair was pinned up in an elaborate arrangement that was starting to come loose on the left side. Her eyes were dry, but the skin below them had that raw, tight look that came after crying had stopped, not before it started. She was holding her phone in both hands with a grip that had gone white at the knuckles. She was also, he noticed despite himself, extraordinarily beautiful in the way that people were beautiful when they'd stopped performing and didn't yet know it. "How much time does she think I have?" Vanessa asked. "Ceremony's at 11, so about 15 minutes. She laughed. It wasn't a good laugh. It was the sound of someone recognizing something terrible about their situation from a new angle. 15 minutes. She looked down at the phone, then at him. "Do you know who I am?" "Vanessa Sterling, yes." "And you know what's supposed to happen in 15 minutes?" "I do." "Then you understand why this is—" She stopped, pressed her lips together, looked at the window. "I found something on his phone, an hour ago. Texts going back 14 months. Noah didn't say anything. "It's not—" She stopped again, differently this time. "It's not even that he was unfaithful. I could maybe understand that. People are weak, people make mistakes." She finally looked directly at him. "He was laughing about me. To her. About how easy it was. About how I'd never see it coming because I was too focused on the company. He called me—" Her jaw went tight. "It doesn't matter what he called me." "No," Noah said. "It doesn't. I have 300 people downstairs, my board of directors. The press is outside. My mother is in the front row and she flew in from Phoenix, and she's been waiting for this for—" She exhaled hard. And I'm supposed to walk down those stairs in 14 minutes and marry a man who thinks I'm an idiot. The corridor was quiet. Somewhere below them, the organ had started a low, ambient piece that echoed up through the floor. What do you want to do? Noah asked. She looked at him like the question surprised her, like she'd expected him to tell her what to do, or to list the options available to her, or to remind her of the people waiting downstairs. I want to leave, she said. I want to get in a car and leave, and not stop until I'm somewhere nobody knows my name. Okay, he said. She blinked. Okay? My car's at the east entrance. I can have it at the side door in 2 minutes. That door opens onto the service alley. The press is all out front. She stared at him. You do that. It's your wedding. Or it's not your wedding. Either way, it's your decision. Your job is to drive people where they need to go. He held her gaze. Where do you need to go? She looked at the phone in her hands one more time. Then she set it down on the side table by the door, screen down, with the quiet finality of someone closing a chapter they'd spent too long reading. I need a minute to get out of this dress, she said. Take 2, he said. I'll get the car. But he had the Lincoln at the side door in 90 seconds. He texted Sandra, unavailable for the next few hours. Family situation. He turned off his radio. Vanessa came through the service door 3 minutes later in what appeared to be a bridesmaid's emergency backup outfit, dark slacks and a cream blouse, her hair half unpinned, carrying nothing but a small handbag and a pair of flat shoes she was still putting on as she walked. She'd left the dress behind. He didn't know what she'd done with it and didn't ask. She got in the back seat without looking at the cathedral. He pulled out of the alley before she'd finished closing the door. Neither of them said anything for the first 3 blocks. The city moved around them. Normal Wednesday morning traffic, a delivery truck double parked outside a coffee shop, a woman pushing a stroller with one hand and scrolling her phone with the other. The world completely indifferent to the fact that somewhere behind them, a very expensive ceremony was about to begin without its bride. They're going to figure it out in about 5 minutes, Vanessa said. Probably less. My phone is going to... As if on cue, the handbag on the seat beside her began to buzz. She looked at it for a moment, then zipped it closed. His name is Marcus. His name was Marcus. She said it like she was trying to get the tense right. 4 years. We were together for 4 years. Noah changed lanes, let a taxi cut in ahead of him. Do you want to talk about it or not talk about it? She considered that. Not right now. All right. Where are we going? Wherever you want. Do you have somewhere? She was quiet for a moment. I can't go to my apartment. He has a key. I can't go to the office because every journalist in the city is going to be calling within the hour. I can't go to a hotel because someone will recognize me. Okay. I'm not asking you to solve it. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth briefly. I'm just thinking out loud. You want to keep driving for a while? She looked out the window at the buildings sliding past. Yeah, she said. Yeah, I think I do. He drove. He took the river road, which curved north along the water and had almost no traffic on weekday mornings. The Hudson was gray and slow on their left, catching the October light in flat pieces. He turned off the main radio and let the car fall into silence. Not the pressing kind, but the kind that had space in it. He'd driven a lot of people over the years, mostly executives and clients who used him as the backdrop to important phone calls. People who treated the car like a conference room with windows. In 7 years of doing this, he'd learned to read when someone needed noise and when they needed quiet. And Vanessa Sterling, currently sitting in the back seat of his Lincoln with her hair coming completely undone and her phone buzzing through the leather of her handbag in irregular, frantic pulses, needed quiet. So he gave her quiet. They drove for 40 minutes. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Somewhere past the waterfront park, she reached into the handbag and silenced the phone without looking at it, and something in her shoulders dropped about half an inch. Finally, she said, "What's your name?" "Noah." "Just Noah?" "Bennett. Noah Bennett." She nodded slowly, like she was filing it away. "How long have you been driving?" 7 years. "Before that?" He glanced in the rearview mirror. She was looking at the back of his head with genuine curiosity, not the polite kind. Construction. Before that, a couple years of college that didn't go anywhere useful. What happened with college? My daughter happened, he said. Not as a problem, just priorities shifted. How old? 8. Her name's Chloe. Something crossed Vanessa's face, too quick to name. You're doing it alone? Yeah. That's... She stopped. That's hard. It's fine, he said, in the way that people said it's fine when it was actually fine, not when they were pretending. She's the best part of my day, every day. He changed lanes to avoid a slowing garbage truck. Her mom's not in the picture, has been for 3 years. We're good. She does okay? Better than me most of the time. He almost smiled. She told me this morning that excuses are just explanations that didn't work. Vanessa let out a short, surprised sound that was close to a laugh. I know, she's 8. Where does she get that? Her teacher, Mrs. Okafor. I'm starting to think Mrs. Okafor is running some kind of philosophical re-education program through 2nd grade. This time Vanessa actually laughed. Brief, a little rough, like it surprised her. And then she caught it and stopped, and then seemed quietly annoyed at herself for stopping. You can laugh, he said, not unkindly. There's no rule against it. 4 hours ago, I was getting my hair pinned up by a woman who charged $700 for the appointment, Vanessa said. I think I'm still working out how to feel about today. That's fair. My mother is going to, She stopped. She worked very hard to like Marcus. He wasn't what she envisioned, but she worked at it. She was proud. A beat. She's going to take this hard. Whose wedding would it have been? Silence. Yours or hers? She didn't answer immediately. He could see in the mirror that she'd turned to look at the river. I've been asking myself that for about 3 months, she said finally. I think I knew. I think on some level I knew something was wrong and I kept... She exhaled. Kept scheduling things, kept adding items to the list. Venue selection, invitation design, catering meetings. Like if I kept myself busy enough with the logistics of getting married, I wouldn't have to actually examine whether I wanted to. She said it flatly, the way people stated things that had cost them something to understand. That's very human, Noah said. It's very stupid. Sometimes those are the same thing. She looked at the mirror then, at the back of his eyes in it, and held the look for a moment. Then she turned back to the river. They drove another 20 minutes before the silence shifted again. Marcus came to me 18 months ago with an investment opportunity, she said. Her voice had changed slightly, but less raw, more flat. She was telling him something she'd already told herself 100 times, working out the shape of it. Wanted in on a funding round for a company his friend was starting. I looked at the numbers and they were garbage, and I told him so, and he got angry, really angry. More than he should have. I asked him why he cared so much about one deal, and he said he didn't, that he was just frustrated because I always defaulted to skepticism. She paused. I apologized. Noah didn't say anything. 3 weeks later, he proposed. A beat. I thought it was because we'd worked through something difficult, because we'd argued like real people and come out the other side. She stopped. The texts, she said. There were texts to her from that week. He said the proposal was a move, that I'd be easier to manage if I thought I was loved. She laughed again, that short, airless sound. That's what he wrote. Easier to manage. I'm sorry, Noah said. Don't be. Be glad you don't know him. She pressed her fingertips against her temple. I run a company worth $3 billion. I have 47 employees who depend on me to make good decisions, and her voice tightened briefly. I almost handed 20% of my equity to a man who thought I was manageable. The word landed in the car and stayed there. They were approaching the waterfront park's north end now, where a small parking area overlooked a concrete pier. Without entirely deciding to, Noah pulled in and stopped the car. The engine idled quietly. The river was maybe 30 feet ahead, flat and wide and going wherever rivers go. Can I ask you something? He said. Go ahead. Why did you open the door? She looked at the mirror. When? At the cathedral. You didn't have to. You could have sent me away. He half turned in his seat. Not fully, just enough to include her in the conversation rather than conducting it through the mirror. You didn't know me. I was just some driver standing in the hall. So why'd you open the door? Vanessa was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands in her lap. Because you said you weren't going to pretend, she said. Everyone else today was pretending. The event coordinator was pretending she didn't notice I'd been crying. The bridesmaids were pretending they didn't see the phone. Even Marcus. She stopped. He's been pretending for 4 years. You were the first person all morning who was just... She paused. Straight with me. That's a low bar, he said. You have no idea, she said, how low the bar gets. He nodded slowly. He believed her. The river moved. A barge went past, heavy and slow, leaving a wide wake behind it. I should figure out where I'm actually going, Vanessa said. You don't have to figure it out right now. I can't drive around indefinitely. You can for a while longer. She looked at him again, that same frank, assessing look she'd given him through the doorway. Why are you being this kind to me? He thought about it honestly before answering, because he didn't want to give her the easy version. I don't know exactly, he said. Partly because I'd want someone to do the same for me if I'd just had the worst morning of my life. Partly because I've got a daughter who I'm trying to teach that people are worth taking a minute for. He paused. And partly because you looked at me from that balcony and you looked like someone who needed one person to just not have an agenda. She didn't say anything for a moment. I was looking at the courtyard, she said, not at you. You saw me looking and you met my eyes. That doesn't mean I was looking at you. All right, he said, a faint hint of something in his voice that wasn't quite a smile. She made a sound. She stopped. Fine. Maybe I was looking at you. She looked back out at the river. You seemed like you didn't care who I was. I care, he said. I just didn't care in the way most people care, like it mattered. She absorbed that in silence. Her phone buzzed again through the bag. She reached in, glanced at the screen, and this time answered. Mom? A pause. Then, I know, I'm safe. I'm going to call you in an hour. I just need... Another pause. Her voice went flat with the effort of keeping it steady. I know you flew in. I know. Mom, She closed her eyes. Please don't cry. Please. I'll explain everything later. I just need 1 hour. Can you give me 1 hour? She listened. Okay, I love you. 1 hour. She ended the call and sat for a moment with the phone held loose in her hand. She's okay, she said quietly, to no one. She's okay. It seemed like something she was saying to convince herself. Do you want to get out for a few minutes? Noah asked. Walk a little? She looked at the pier. In this? She gestured at herself. The borrowed blouse, the half-unpinned hair. Nobody knows you out here. She looked around at the empty parking area, the gray river, the barge disappearing northward. Then she opened the door. They walked to the end of the pier without talking. The wind off the water was cold and smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet. Vanessa crossed her arms against it. Her hair was fully down now. Some combination of the wind and the morning had finished what the ceremony never got to start. She wasn't the person from the magazine covers out here. She wasn't the CEO or the runaway bride or the almost victim of a calculated 4-year con. She was just a woman standing at the end of a pier, looking at water, trying to figure out what came next. I've never done anything like this before, she said. Run away from a wedding? Run away from anything. She kept her eyes on the river. I have a reputation for... People say I don't back down, that I walk toward problems, that I don't... She paused. I've built an entire identity around not running. This wasn't running, Noah said. What was it? He considered. Knowing the difference between walking away and giving up, he watched the water. You didn't give up on anything worth keeping. She turned to look at him then, fully, not through a mirror, not through a cracked door. He was in profile, watching the river, his hands in his jacket pockets, his face carrying the kind of weathered calm that came not from being unaffected by things, but from having been affected by enough of them to stop being surprised. You talk like someone who's thought about this, she said. I've had some versions of it myself. He glanced at her sideways. different scale. Tell me. He didn't answer immediately. He pulled one hand out of his pocket and turned it over, looking at his palm briefly, a habit she didn't have context for yet. When Chloe's mom left, I had this plan, had it all laid out. Night school while working, save enough to get the business license, own my own car service by the time Chloe started school. He dropped his hand back in his pocket. None of it happened. I had to drop the night school when childcare fell through. Savings went to a medical bill when she was 5. The business license is still in a folder on my desk that I haven't opened in 8 months. He said it flatly, not bitterly. For a while I called it running away from the plan. Thought I was a quitter. But then I realized I'd been staying, every day, showing up. He looked at the river. There's a version of staying that looks like giving up if you're only checking against the original plan. She was quiet for a moment. That's a good way to think about it, she said. It's what Chloe taught me. Not in words, just by being there. Vanessa looked at the water. The wind shifted and pulled a strand of hair across her face, and she pushed it back absently. I'm going to have to rebuild everything, she said. The narrative, the board's confidence, My former fiancé is going to tell his version of this story first. He has enough connections in the press to make sure his version is sympathetic, and mine is, she set her jaw. Mine will be the scorned woman who fell apart before the ceremony. That's the story they'll print. That's one story, Noah said. It's the one that moves fastest. Sure, but stories that move fast usually don't last. He looked at her. The slow ones are the ones people remember. She studied him. Where'd you drive before this? Philosophy school? West Hartford mostly, a lot of traffic. That surprised her into a real laugh. Not the brief self-conscious kind from earlier, but a full one, off guard, genuine, and it changed her face entirely. Made her look younger, made her look like someone who'd laughed a lot before life taught her to ration it. The laugh faded. She shook her head slowly. I just ran away from my own wedding. Yeah, that actually happened. It did. She blew out a long breath. Okay. She straightened her spine. Not performatively, not for anyone watching, just the physical reset of someone who'd made a decision. Okay, I need a hotel that's not in my usual radius. Boutique, nothing in the city center. She turned and started walking back toward the car. And I need 45 minutes to call my mother and my CFO before I call my lawyers. I know a place, he said, falling into step beside her. Small, good, about 20 minutes north. Owner's a client of mine. She'll give you a room without making a thing of it. Vanessa glanced at him sideways. You seem very calm about all of this. I'm a driver, he said. People have crises in my car once a week at minimum. I've taken a person to the ER, talked 2 different clients out of making phone calls they'd have regretted, and once drove a man 40 miles before he admitted he was at the wrong wedding entirely. She stopped walking. That last one. Different story, long drive home. She shook her head again, but the corner of her mouth was lifted. It wasn't much, but it was something. They got back in the car. The Alden was exactly what he'd said. Small, north of the city, set off the road behind a stand of oaks that had gone fully gold. The woman at the desk, Nina, a compact 50-year-old with reading glasses perpetually on top of her head, looked at Vanessa without recognition, and then looked at her again and didn't say a word about it. She handed over a key card and told her the kitchen was open until 10. Noah waited in the lobby while Vanessa checked in. When she came back, she stood in front of him with her handbag on her shoulder and her flat shoes and her borrowed blouse, and the slightly formal posture of someone who wasn't sure how to close out a situation that didn't have a clear protocol. Thank you, she said. You're all right, he said. I mean it. You didn't have to. I know. She looked at him for a moment. Then, I'm going to need someone to drive me around for a while I figure out my situation. She said it carefully, like she was aware of how it could sound. I mean, professionally. I don't have a regular driver in the city. I usually use a service, but Marcus knew the dispatch manager there, and I don't want... She stopped. I'd pay your full rate. Whatever you charge. I know what this is, he said mildly. She blinked. What do you mean? You're trying to repay a kindness by turning it into a transaction so it doesn't feel like debt. He said it without accusation. You don't owe me anything. He shrugged. Today was just a person helping another person. She stared at him. That's a very specific read. Did I get it wrong? A long pause. Partially, she said carefully. The other part is that I genuinely do need a driver, and you're the only person in this city I trust right now, and that is a sad and accurate statement about my current circumstances. He considered that. I'll think about it, he said. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. She nodded, not disappointed, just registering it. My number's in the system under the booking, if you decide. She looked at him one more moment, that same direct, slightly unnerving quality to her attention. You're a strange person, Noah Bennett. Yeah, he said. I get that. She walked toward the elevator. He watched her go, straight-backed, measured, carrying the full weight of a completely dismantled morning with a kind of grim competence that he found, despite himself, more impressive than anything her press profiles had ever described about her. He drove home with the radio off. He picked Chloe up at 3:15, walked her to the corner bodega for a post-school apple juice, and listened to her tell him about a conflict with a boy named Damien, who had, according to Chloe, spread a completely false rumor that she had never read a full book when she had in fact read at least 7. Did you tell him that? I told him to name one book, and he said Captain Underpants, and I said, that's not a serious book. Is it a book? She thought about it. Yes. Then it counts. Dad, rules are rules, Chloe. He finished his coffee. Did you work it out? We agreed to disagree. That's very mature of you. I know, she said, entirely without irony. He made dinner that night. Pasta, nothing special. The kind that came together in 20 minutes while Chloe sat on the counter and talked at him. After dinner, after homework, after the bedtime argument about the book Chloe was reading with a flashlight under her covers that he'd pretended not to notice, he sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing for a while. He thought about a woman standing at the end of a pier in borrowed clothes, looking at a river. He thought about 4 years, about the way she'd said easier to manage, not in anger, but in the flat, precise way people repeated things that had already done their damage. He thought about his phone sitting on the table, with her number somewhere in the booking system he could access from the app. He thought about what it meant to need someone and to know it and to ask for it anyway, which was something that had always cost him more than it should have. He closed the app without opening the booking. He washed the dishes. He checked the door. He turned off the kitchen light. He thought about it again in the dark and told himself it was none of his business, which was true, and also that it was the kind of thing he'd wonder about if he walked away, which was also true. He lay in bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. In the next room, Chloe had finally put the flashlight away. He could hear her slow breathing through the thin wall, steady and even. The uncomplicated rhythm of someone 8 years old with no real reason to stay awake. He closed his eyes. He thought about the laugh she'd finally let go of at the end of the pier. How it had arrived like something she hadn't meant to let out, and how her face had changed in that moment into something unguarded and real and entirely different from the version that appeared on the front of magazines. He thought about the word trust. The only person in this city I trust right now. He stared at the ceiling. He thought it was probably going to be harder to forget than he wanted it to be. He called the next morning. He told himself it was a professional decision, which was partially true. He did need the work. November was slow every year, the stretch between the fall event season and the holiday rush when regular bookings thinned out, and he had to patch the gaps with airport runs and one-off jobs that paid fine but didn't add up to much. A steady client would help. That was a real consideration. He also told himself it had nothing to do with the way she'd laughed at the end of the pier, which was less true. The number was in the booking system under her room at the Alden. He called at 8:47, which felt like a reasonable hour. Late enough not to be intrusive, early enough to be useful. She picked up on the second ring. You thought about it, she said, instead of hello. I thought about it. And? I'll drive for you, same rate I charge for regular clients, no different arrangement just because of yesterday. You need somewhere, I take you. You don't tell me where we're going until we're moving. And if I ever think something's going sideways in a way that's not my business, I'll say so. A brief pause. That last condition is unusual. I know. Most drivers don't build editorial rights into the contract. I'm not most drivers. Another pause. When she spoke again, something in her voice had shifted slightly. Not warmer exactly, but less defended. Fine. Can you be here by 9:30? I have a call with my CFO at 10, and I need to be somewhere that isn't this hotel room when I have it. I'll be there at 9:15. He was there at 9:10. The first week was mostly logistics. Vanessa was rebuilding from the outside in, the practical architecture of a life that had been abruptly dismantled. She needed access to her apartment on days when Marcus wouldn't be there, which required coordinating with her building's management and eventually with a lawyer who moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who charged $400 an hour and was worth every cent. She needed 3 different meetings with her board of directors, 2 of which were held in locations deliberately chosen to avoid the press that had staked out her usual offices. She needed to move assets, change account access, terminate a joint lease on a weekend property in Vermont that she'd never actually liked. Noah drove her to all of it. He learned in that first week how she moved through the world. She was never late, ever, not once, which he respected and which also occasionally stressed him out, because she expected punctuality with the serene certainty of someone who'd never had to fight traffic from the north end of the city with a school drop-off in the middle. She drank black coffee with the intensity of a long-standing relationship. She read on her phone during drives but always looked up when he spoke, giving him her full attention in a way that most people in the back seat never did. She tipped generously and thanked the staff wherever they went, not the automatic courtesy thank you of the wealthy, but the specific kind, actually using names, actually noticing. She also had, he discovered, a habit of going very still and very quiet right before she said something that cost her something to say. He noticed this on the 4th day, when she went still in the back seat for almost 2 minutes during a drive across the bridge, and then said, without preamble, "He's already talking to people." Marcus? His PR firm put out a statement this morning. I saw it on my news alert. She was looking out the window. It frames the whole thing as a breakdown. A bride getting cold feet. Suggests I have instabilities. She said the word with measured contempt. His exact phrasing was struggled with certain pressures of public life. What are you going to do about it? Right now, nothing. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck the way people did when they were monitoring their own pulse, consciously or not. My lawyers say responding now only amplifies it. The story dies faster if I don't feed it. Do you believe them? She was quiet for a moment. I believe the strategy. I hate the execution. She turned from the window. I have 47 employees who are reading that story this morning and wondering if their CEO is actually unstable. I have investors who... She stopped. Perception is the only currency that matters in my industry, and right now mine is taking a hit and I have to sit on my hands. For how long? Until my lawyers say otherwise. He drove. She went back to looking at the window. He let the silence sit until it needed to be filled. For what it's worth, he said, the people who know you are going to know the difference. She made a sound. The people who know me number about 6. My CFO, my head of product, Nina from the hotel, apparently, my mother. She paused. You. He glanced at the mirror. That's not 6. I was being generous. He nodded. Then those 6 people matter more than the story. They don't control the funding rounds. Not today, he said. But they're still there next month. The story won't be. She looked at him in the mirror for a moment. He couldn't read the expression entirely, somewhere between skeptical and wanting to believe him. You have a very inconvenient habit, she said, of making reasonable points when I'm trying to be angry. I can stop. Please don't, she said, turning back to the window. Paras. It was 11 days after the wedding when Chloe got sick. Noah was parked outside Vanessa's board meeting, a 3rd-floor conference room in a nondescript building in Midtown that her CFO, David Park, had borrowed from a law firm he knew. The meeting was supposed to run until 2. It was 12:40 when his phone rang, and the number on the screen was the school's main line. He answered it before it rang twice. Mr. Bennett? This is Amy from the front office at Crestwood. Chloe came in from recess not feeling well. She's running a temperature and she's asking for you. Can you come get her? I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and immediately texted Vanessa through the booking app. School called. Chloe's sick. I have to leave. I can call another driver from the service. They can be there in 30 minutes. Her reply came in 40 seconds. Go. Don't worry about me. Then 5 seconds later, is she okay? He was already pulling out of the parking structure. He typed back with one thumb at a red light. Fever. She'll be fine. Vanessa replied, Okay. Let me know. He pocketed the phone and drove. Chloe was sitting in the nurse's office in the chair closest to the door, backpack in her lap, looking the particular kind of miserable that children looked when they were sick enough to feel awful, but not sick enough to be scary. Pale at the edges, eyes heavy, a sulky set to her mouth that was really just discomfort looking for something to blame. When she saw Noah, she said, I told Mrs. Okafor I was fine. You have 101. That's barely a fever. It's a fever. He crouched down to her level and pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. She was warm and slightly clammy. Come on, let's get you home. I had a math test this afternoon. The math test will happen again. Not the same math test. Chloe. She put her backpack on with the heavy resignation of someone twice her age and followed him out to the car. He settled her in the back seat with her jacket over her lap and the heat on higher than he usually kept it. She was quiet for the first few minutes, which was its own form of diagnostic. Chloe not talking meant Chloe feeling genuinely bad. My throat hurts, she said finally. I'll get something for it when we get home. And my head? Yeah. And my stomach, a little. Okay, Chloe. And I believe you, he said. You're sick. It's allowed. She was quiet again. Then, who were you driving today? Work client. The important one. He glanced in the mirror. She was watching the back of his head with her heavy eyes. What do you mean, the important one? You texted someone before you called me back. I heard the sound. I texted the client I had to leave. Is it the one you've been driving all week? How do you know about that? She shrugged, which was diminished by the jacket over her shoulders. You're home later, and you whistle when you're making dinner instead of just doing it quiet. He looked at the mirror again. I don't whistle, he said. You do. It's this thing. She hummed something approximating a tuneless melody. Like that. When you think I'm not paying attention. He turned back to the road. It's a client. I drive a lot of clients. But this one's different. Why do you think that? Because you're talking about the client without saying anything about them, she said. That's what you do when something's actually important. He didn't answer that, because she wasn't entirely wrong and she was 8 years old and he wasn't going to confirm it. Do you want soup or do you want crackers when we get home? He asked. Both, she said, and settled back in her jacket with the pragmatic indifference of someone who'd made her point and was willing to let it rest. He was in the kitchen making the soup. Actual soup, not the can, because Chloe had once very specifically said that can soup tasted like what she imagined the word bland smelled like, and he'd never been able to go back to it, when his phone buzzed on the counter. Vanessa Sterling. How's she doing? He stirred the pot and typed back one-handed. Fever's down a bit. She's on the couch. Complaining, which is good. 3 dots appeared, then, what does she need? Soup and probably a movie. The usual. Are you okay? I know this threw off your whole day. He set the phone down and thought about that for a second, then picked it up. I'm fine. This is the job. Being a parent, I mean, not the driving. Right. A pause. The board meeting ended early, actually. David called a recess when one of the investors had a flight conflict. We're resuming Thursday. So it all worked out. He typed, good. Another pause, longer this time. Then, can I ask you something? And you can say no. He waited. Would it be all right if I came by? Not for work. Just, I've been in that hotel room for 11 days, and I made the mistake of watching the news, and now I'm sitting here with the curtains closed, and I think I need to be somewhere that isn't this. He read it twice. He thought about all the reasons to say it wasn't a great idea. He thought about Chloe on the couch. He thought about the fact that his apartment had mismatched furniture and a kitchen that smelled like onions and a bathroom where the grout between the tiles was slightly grayer than it should be despite his best efforts. He typed, "Address is in the system. Bring your own socks. I don't have guests." The reply came immediately. "I'll see you in 20 minutes." He looked at the pot of soup and mentally adjusted the quantity. She arrived in 23 minutes, which for Vanessa Sterling was basically late. She was in a gray hoodie he didn't recognize and dark jeans and the flat shoes from the day at the cathedral, and she was carrying a plastic bag from the drugstore on the corner. "I didn't know what she liked," she said at the door, holding out the bag. "So I got options." He took the bag and looked inside. Orange juice, 2 different flavors of throat drops, a box of the kind of crackers that came in the individual serving packs, a small stuffed elephant, and a celebrity gossip magazine that had, he suspected, been purchased with a very specific self-aware humor. He looked up at her. "The elephant seemed appropriate," she said. "The magazine is for me. I haven't read one since I became the subject of them." He stepped back from the door to let her in. She came into the apartment and stopped just inside the entrance. He watched her take it in. The narrow hallway, the bookshelves that were too full for the wall space, the hooks by the door loaded with Chloe's assorted jackets and one of his, the kitchen visible through the doorway, the pot on the stove. The living room with its couch that had a good impression of him on the left cushion and the small TV that he'd gotten secondhand and which worked perfectly except the HDMI port on the left side. She didn't say anything about any of it. She didn't do the performative thing that some people did when they came to places smaller than they were used to. The slightly too enthusiastic, "Oh, it's so cozy," the careful way of not noticing. She just looked at it like it was a room, and she was in it. "The soup smells good," she said. "Onion and carrot base. Nothing special." "It smells like—" She stopped, and something shifted in her expression briefly, there and gone. "It smells like a home." From the couch, Chloe's voice floated in. "Dad, who's here?" "Someone from work," he called back. "Can I see?" He looked at Vanessa. She raised her eyebrows in a question that said, "Your call." He nodded, and she followed him into the living room. Chloe was on the couch with a blanket pulled to her chin, her hair loose and slightly tangled, and she looked at Vanessa with the open, unfiltered assessment that children executed with no awareness of how unnerving it was. Vanessa looked back at her with the same quality of attention, though slightly more self-conscious about it. "You're the client," Chloe said. "I am," Vanessa said. "What's your name?" "Vanessa." Chloe considered this. "That's a good name." "Thank you. I think Noah is a good name too." Chloe looked at her father. "She knows your name." "Clients usually do," he said. "Some of them just call you the driver, and I know because you do the thing with your jaw." Vanessa turned her head slightly to look at him. He was very deliberately not doing anything with his jaw. "Chloe," he said. "What?" She looked at Vanessa again. "Are you sick too?" "No, just tired." "Of what?" "Chloe." "It's a real question," Chloe said with perfect sincerity. Being tired of something specific is different from just being tired. Vanessa looked at her for a moment. Then she sat down on the far end of the couch, at a distance that was respectful without being clinical, and said, "Of being in the same room by myself, mostly." Chloe nodded with the gravity of someone who found this answer satisfactory. "We have soup," she said, "and the crackers are in the bag somewhere." "I know," Vanessa said. "I brought the bag." Chloe looked at the drugstore bag on the coffee table, then at Vanessa, then at her father, and then said, "Oh," in the particular way that children said "oh" when they were quietly reassigning someone in their internal categorization system. Noah went back to the kitchen. The soup was done in 15 minutes. He carried bowls out, one for Chloe, one for himself, and he'd added a third without making a thing of it, and found Vanessa on the couch and Chloe explaining, with great specificity, the correct and incorrect ways to play the board game currently open on the coffee table between them. The game was Sequence, which Noah had bought at a second-hand store 18 months ago, and which Chloe had appointed herself sole arbiter of. The rule is you can't skip a sequence if it's clearly built, Chloe was explaining, even if the rules don't technically say that. That's not a rule, Vanessa said. It's a Chloe rule. There's a difference between a rule and a preference. Chloe looked at her. Mrs. Okafor says the same thing. Mrs. Okafor is right. Chloe appeared to weigh the significance of two people she respected arriving independently at the same position. Fine, she said. It's a preference, but I still don't like it when people skip. Noah set the bowls down and said nothing. He sat in the armchair across from the couch and ate his soup and watched the two of them argue the finer points of sequence rules with the quality of attention he hadn't given anything in a while. Vanessa played the game with the focused competitiveness of someone who did not lose on purpose and did not believe in false kindness. She beat Chloe in the first round, which Chloe accepted with visible displeasure and a close examination of the board for rules violations. Finding none, she reset the pieces and said, again, You should eat your soup, Noah said. I'm eating and thinking at the same time, Chloe said, which was categorically false since she had not touched her spoon. Eat, he said. Then again. Chloe ate her soup with focused efficiency, watching Vanessa reset the board as though memorizing her technique. They played 3 more rounds. Vanessa won the second. Chloe won the third and fourth with a degree of enthusiasm that Noah suspected had involved some creative interpretation of the no-skipping preference, but Vanessa let it stand without comment. By the third game, Chloe's color was slightly better. The soup helped. Being annoyed about losing also helped. Irritation had its own restorative properties in 8-year-olds. At some point, Vanessa had shifted on the couch, and Chloe had migrated closer without either of them apparently deciding to do this, until they were sitting near enough that the game board was between them and Chloe was occasionally reaching across to move Vanessa's pieces to more strategically useful positions. That's not how you play, Vanessa said. I'm helping. You're helping me lose. I'm helping you play better. It's different. It's genuinely not. Noah watched this and said nothing. At 6:30, Chloe's temperature spiked again. Nothing alarming, 101.4. And she went quiet in the way that meant the fight had gone out of her for the evening. He got her into bed, and she went without the usual negotiation, which told him more about how she felt than any thermometer. He came back to the living room, and Vanessa was standing at the bookshelf, looking at the books with her arms crossed. She'd been reading the spines with the automatic curiosity of someone who always looked at people's bookshelves when left alone in rooms. You have 3 books on carpentry, she said. I used to be in construction. And 2 on child psychology. New territory, needed backup. She looked at one book in particular, a worn paperback with a cracked spine that had been read many times. Emotional Intelligence in Single-Parent Families. She glanced at him over her shoulder. Was that helpful? Chapter 3, he said. Everything else was too academic. She turned from the shelf and sat back on the couch, curling one leg underneath her. She'd taken her shoes off at some point and was wearing socks, her own, as instructed. She looked different in his apartment than she did anywhere else he'd seen her, less assembled. Not in a diminished way, more like something that had been held at a specific tension all the time was just slightly released. She's great, Vanessa said. I know. You know it, and I can tell you know it. Some parents, they say it and you can hear the uncertainty, like they're hoping it's true. She picked up her soup bowl from the coffee table. She'd been eating in small intervals between game rounds, and finished the last of it. You just know it, like it's a fact. She's the easiest fact I've got, he said. Vanessa looked at the empty bowl. This soup is genuinely good. Did you make this from scratch? Onions, carrots, some garlic. Broth from the carton. Takes 20 minutes. I've never... She stopped and seemed to catch herself. I haven't cooked an actual meal since college. I have a service that delivers. Every meal? Every meal. She set the bowl down. It seemed efficient. I work a lot. Efficient, he repeated. Don't. I didn't say anything. You said efficient in a tone. I said it neutrally. She looked at him. You said it the way people say efficient when they mean, is that actually how you want to live? He held up a hand. I'm not judging how you live. You don't need to judge. You just look at things and they know what you think. My face is neutral. Your face is extremely not neutral. She picked up the celebrity gossip magazine from the bag and looked at the cover. She was on it. The headline read, in the breathless font of a publication with no restraint, Runaway Bride, Vanessa Sterling's Meltdown. She looked at it for a moment, then set it face down on the table. I should not have bought that. Why did you? Because I thought it would be funny. It's less funny than I thought. What does it say? Nothing accurate. My hair is described as disheveled. She looked at him. My hair was fine. Your hair was mostly down by the time we left. It was loosely styled. She said this with just enough self-awareness to make it clear she knew she was being slightly ridiculous, which made it funny rather than defensive. He almost laughed. She saw him almost laugh and pointed at him. Don't, she said. I'm not doing anything. You almost laughed. I was just... Loosely styled is a reasonable description, she said with complete dignity. It absolutely is, he agreed in a tone that communicated the opposite. She threw a couch pillow at him. Not hard, more like punctuation. He caught it, and the moment landed between them with a new quality, lighter than anything the last 2 weeks had carried, and they both felt it and neither of them said anything about it. From down the hall, Chloe's voice drifted out. Dad, can I have water? He got up and got her water and checked her temperature again. It had leveled off. She drank half the glass and handed it back with the gravity of someone completing a transaction. Is Vanessa still here? She asked. She's in the living room. Is she staying for dinner? She already had soup. Is she staying for the second dinner? There's no second dinner. There's always a second dinner, Chloe said with full confidence. You just call it snacks. He turned off her lamp. Sleep. Tell her the crackers are for sharing, Chloe said from the dark. He pulled the door to. Back in the living room, Vanessa had turned on the TV at some point. The local news, volume low, which she was watching with the expression of someone doing reconnaissance. Her own name came up in the last segment before the weather, and she muted it without visible reaction. She says the crackers are for sharing, Noah said. I heard. Vanessa unmuted the TV after the segment ended. She has good hearing. She hears everything. I've given up having private thoughts within 30 feet of her. He sat back in the armchair. Are you actually watching the news or are you monitoring for damage? Both, she said. Mostly the second one. She tucked the pillow behind her back. My lawyer called while you were with her. Marcus's PR firm has been busy. There are 3 pieces going up tomorrow. 2 in trade publications, 1 in the style section of a paper I actually respected until about an hour ago. Her jaw tightened briefly. All of them sourced to unnamed people close to the couple, which means Marcus, or Marcus paying someone. She said his name with the flat efficiency of someone who'd stopped spending emotion on it and was now just filing it under operational costs. He's trying to preempt whatever story I tell. What story are you going to tell? I don't know yet. She looked at the silent news. The truth is messy. The evidence is real. The texts are real. The financial maneuvering is real. My lawyers have documented all of it. But releasing evidence looks like retaliation. And retaliation looks like instability. And instability looks like... She stopped. I keep running into the same problem. To prove I'm not falling apart, I have to talk about the thing that would make anyone fall apart. And the act of talking about it will be framed as falling apart. So you wait, he said. So I wait. She exhaled slowly. I'm not good at waiting. I know. She looked at him. How do you know? We've known each other 2 weeks. You've sent me 4 messages at 6 in the morning, he said. All of them logistics. Not urgent logistics. Things that could have waited until 8. You send them at 6 because you've been up since 5 and you can't not do something. She opened her mouth and then closed it. It's not a criticism, he said. It's a very accurate observation that I'm not sure I authorized you to make. You can revoke it if you want. She looked at the TV for a moment. No, she said. It's accurate. She pulled her knee up against her chest. My father used to say I had ants in my blood, that I was always 3 steps ahead and 2 steps sideways, and never quite in the room I was in. She paused. He said it like it was a problem. Later, I figured out it was the only thing that made me good at what I do. Another pause, shorter. I don't actually know which one of us was right. Maybe both. Maybe both, she agreed quietly. They sat in the kind of quiet that had stopped being uncomfortable at some point in the last hour. The TV cycled to the weather. Rain coming tomorrow, clearing by the weekend, nothing dramatic. Noah leaned his head back against the chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Since when do you ask permission?" "Since I'm about to ask something that might be too personal." She turned from the TV. "Go ahead. Do you miss him?" She was still. The question settled in the room. "No," she said, and then immediately, "Yes, but not the way." She stopped, reorganizing. "I miss the version of him I believed in, which wasn't real, so I don't know if missing it counts." She was quiet for a moment. "I miss being certain. I was very certain about my life 14 days ago. I knew where I was going. I knew what the next 5 years looked like." She looked at her hands. "Now I don't know what next month looks like, and I'm—" She stopped again. "I'm not falling apart. I want that on the record." "It's on the record. I'm rebuilding. There's a difference." "There is," he said. "It's just louder than I expected." He looked at her, not the careful professional look of a driver watching his client through a rearview mirror, but directly. The way you looked at someone when the masks were down and the distance had closed enough that pretending not to see clearly seemed dishonest. "You walked out of that room into a stranger's car," he said. "That took something." "Desperation," she said. "Maybe. But you made it work anyway." He held her gaze. "That's not falling apart. That's the thing people don't give themselves credit for. Doing the next right thing even when the floor's gone out from under them." She looked at him for a moment that lasted long enough to mean something. "I almost didn't open the door," she said, "when you knocked." She looked down briefly. "I had my hand on the phone. I was going to go back out there and walk down those stairs and marry him." He didn't say anything. "Because it was the plan," she said, "and I'm very good at the plan." She laughed quietly, without humor. "What stopped me was the phrase easier to manage. I kept reading it on the screen, and every time I read it, something—" She put her hand flat on her chest briefly. "Something just said no. Whatever part of me had agreed to all of it said no to that one thing." "That part of you was right," he said. She looked at him again. "Yes," she said. It was. The rain the weather forecast had promised arrived early. A quiet rain that started tapping against the windows around 9 o'clock. Not dramatic, just steady. Vanessa stayed until nearly 10. They talked about small things. Chloe's teacher and her apparent appetite for moral philosophy. The carpentry books and why he'd bought them. A story she told about her first office being a shared co-working space where the Wi-Fi was down for most of her first week, and she'd made every critical early-stage call from the parking garage where the signal was better. She told it the way she told things when she wasn't performing them. Slightly self-deprecating, specific in the details, without the practice polish of someone used to being a public story. He drove her back to the Alden just after 10, the rain still quiet against the windshield. At the hotel entrance, she gathered her bag and then paused. "Thank you," she said. "For this, the soup, and for not making it a thing." "It's not a thing," he said. She looked at him. "Some people would have made it a thing." "I'm not some people." She looked at him for one moment longer than the conversation required. "No," she said, "you're not." She went inside. He drove home in the rain. He checked on Chloe. Still asleep, temperature closer to normal. The small stuffed elephant from the drugstore bag sitting on the pillow beside her in a position that suggested it had been placed there with care. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen, washed the soup bowls, stacked them in the rack, and stood at the window looking at the rain on the street below. He was thinking about the way she'd said easier to manage, not with anger anymore, but with something quieter, like she was finally setting down something she'd been carrying without knowing she had it. He was also thinking about how the apartment had felt tonight, with 3 bowls on the coffee table and the sequence board between them and Chloe's voice coming down the hall asking about the second dinner. He was thinking about how it had felt less empty than usual. He told himself to stop thinking about it and went to bed. He didn't entirely stop thinking about it. It took Noah 3 days to return Vanessa's calls. Not because he didn't see them. He saw every one. 7 calls over 72 hours, the first arriving the morning after he'd left her building without looking back, the last one coming in just before midnight on the second day, and then nothing. The silence after the last missed call was somehow louder than the calls themselves. He saw them, and he didn't pick up, which was its own kind of answer that he wasn't ready to give out loud. He drove. He picked up Chloe from school. He made dinner. He sat at the kitchen table with the folder of business license paperwork that he'd been meaning to open for 8 months. And he opened it this time, and he read through it, and he closed it again without doing anything with it. He lay in bed at night with the ceiling for company and had the same argument with himself that he'd been having since the moment he'd walked out of Vanessa Sterling's building lobby with his hands in his pockets and the taste of a sentence he should have finished still sitting in the back of his throat. The argument went like this. She had said, "Don't," and he had left, and that was the right thing, the clean thing, the thing that maintained whatever this was without destroying it. The counter-argument went like this. She had said don't, and then she had said his name, and people didn't say names like that unless the word meant more than the word. He went back and forth on it for 3 days, and then on the 4th morning he drove to the Alden. She wasn't there. Nina at the front desk told him, not unkindly, that Ms. Sterling had checked out 2 days ago. She'd moved back into her apartment. He should have known that. Her building management had changed the locks, and Marcus had surrendered his key under instruction from her lawyers 3 weeks prior. She'd been ready to go back. He just hadn't been paying attention because he'd been busy arguing with his own ceiling. He texted her from the parking lot. "I know I went quiet. I'm sorry. If you still want to talk, I'm here." He sat in the car and waited. 11 minutes later. "Come to the office. I'll tell the desk to let you up." Sterling Tech occupied the top 2 floors of a building in the financial district that had floor-to-ceiling windows on the south side and a lobby that had been designed to communicate competence without ostentation. Clean lines, good materials, no excess. The woman at the front desk said his name before he gave it and handed him a visitor badge and pointed him toward the elevator with the practiced efficiency of someone whose job was to make everything look easy. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a young man with a headset looked up, said, "Mr. Bennett," and walked him back through a corridor where he could see people at desks through glass walls, everyone moving with the particular speed of a company that was managing something ongoing. He passed 2 conference rooms, both occupied, and caught fragments of conversation that all carried the same tight, controlled urgency. She was on the phone when he came in. Her office was corner-facing, windows on 2 sides. A desk that had the organized chaos of someone who worked fast and thought faster. 3 screens, 2 open laptops, a legal pad covered in handwriting that went diagonal when she was moving through thoughts quickly. She was standing rather than sitting, which he'd noticed was what she did when the call mattered, her free hand moving in small, tight gestures she probably didn't know she made. She saw him and held up one finger without interrupting her sentence. "The filing date doesn't move, Julian. So whatever Hargrove's team is telling you about the timeline is either misinformation or they don't have the same calendar we do. Push it back to me by 4. She ended the call and set the phone on the desk and looked at him for a moment with an expression that was careful in a way that meant it was covering something else. "Hi," she said. "Hi. You went quiet." "I know, I'm sorry." She crossed her arms, not defensively, more like she was holding herself in one piece while she decided something. 3 days is a long time to go quiet. "I know that too. Are you going to tell me why?" He looked at her. He'd rehearsed some version of this on the drive over, and now that he was here, standing in her actual office with her actual eyes on him, the rehearsed version felt thin and beside the point. "Because I was scared," he said. "Not of you, of what I was starting to, of what it meant." He stopped. Reordered. "I walked out of your building, and I kept thinking about what I almost said to you and what you almost let me say, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I went quiet, which was the wrong call." She was still for a moment. "The wrong call," she repeated. "Yeah. Noah." She unfolded her arms. "I called you 7 times. I know. I'm not someone who calls people 7 times. I have a rule. 2 calls and I stop. I called you 7 times. She looked at him directly. What does that tell you? That I should have picked up sooner. What else? He met her eyes. That it mattered to you. That it mattered to me, she said. Yes, that it mattered. She exhaled, a controlled breath that meant she'd been holding more than she was letting on. I went back to the apartment. It was strange, being there again. Marcus isn't anywhere in it anymore, not physically, but it's still... She looked at the windows briefly. I kept thinking I should call you, and I kept not calling, and then I called 7 times anyway, so apparently my self-control has limits. He almost said something that would have been about the 7 calls and not about anything else, but he caught himself. The thing I almost said, he said, when you told me not to. I remember. I want to say it now, if that's still all right. She held his gaze. A long second. Then, say it. He moved a step closer. Not dramatically. Just the physical equivalent of closing the distance between what he meant and what he'd been keeping back. I think you know what I want, he said. I think you've known for a while. And I know what it looks like. Me being your driver, the way we met, the fact that your life is. Everything it is and mine is what it is. I know how it looks. I don't care how it looks, she said. I do, a little. Not for me, he paused. For Chloe. For what this means if it goes somewhere real. I don't do things halfway when it comes to her. Vanessa's expression shifted. Not softening exactly, but opening. The defended quality that lived in her face in public and sometimes in private too moved aside to make room for something more honest. I know that, she said. So if I'm saying this, you're saying it like it's serious, she said. I understand. She took a step toward him. I'm saying it like it's serious too. He looked at her for a moment. This woman who had walked out of a cathedral in borrowed clothes and stood at the end of a pier and laughed when she hadn't meant to and brought crackers and a stuffed elephant to his apartment and called him 7 times when she had a rule about calling twice. He reached out and took her hand. Not with urgency, just took it, held it, felt the realness of it. Okay, he said. Okay, she said back. It wasn't a kiss or a declaration or anything that would have read as significant from the outside. It was just 2 people in a corner office on a Tuesday morning, standing close enough that the distance was gone, both of them deciding to stop pretending the distance was manageable anyway. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She looked at it, then back at him. I have a board call in 8 minutes, she said. I know. I'm not asking you to leave. I know that too. He let her hand go. Call me when you're done. Don't go quiet again. I won't. He left. But the difference between this leaving and the last one was everything. They didn't announce it to anyone because there was nothing to announce yet. They were both careful people in different ways. Vanessa because she'd learned the cost of misplaced trust. Noah because he'd learned the cost of letting someone into a life that also contained an 8-year-old girl who noticed everything and remembered all of it. So what they had existed in the margins for a while. In the text messages sent at odd hours. In the extra 10 minutes he sat parked outside her building after dropping her off before he finally pulled away. In the way she'd started calling him instead of texting when it wasn't about logistics. It was 3 weeks in when the first piece appeared. He didn't see it himself. He wasn't the type to read gossip columns or follow the financial press. David Park, her CFO, forwarded it to her at 7 in the morning with a message Noah glimpsed over her shoulder while she was reading it in the back seat. You need to see this before the team does. It was a column in a business publication with a readership that overlapped significantly with her investor base. The headline called her professional judgment into question in the way those columns did. Not direct accusation, but implication stacked carefully on implication. The specifics were thin. A photograph of the 2 of them outside a restaurant 2 weeks ago, taken from across the street with a long lens, her hand on his arm. A caption that asked, without asking, whether Vanessa Sterling's post-breakup choices reflected the stability her investors expected. A reference to Noah's occupation that was technically accurate and arranged to feel like a verdict. She read the whole thing twice without changing expression. Then she put her phone down in her lap and looked at the street. Who sent it to them? She said. It wasn't a question. Marcus, Noah said. His PR firm. Same patterns as the last ones. She was quiet for a moment. His timing is good. The Halcyon funding round is in 6 weeks. He knows the investors read this column. She turned the phone face down on her leg. He's not trying to hurt me personally. He's trying to hurt the company's valuation at the moment it matters most. What do you do? I don't react. She said it flat and final, the way someone stated a rule they'd learned at cost. Reacting is what he wants. The story lives on reaction. She looked at the window. I called David. I call the 3 lead investors personally before they call me. I get in front of it. She paused. And I don't let it change anything. He looked at her in the mirror. Does it change anything? A long pause. It makes me angry, she said. Is that the same thing? No. She picked up her phone and called David. He drove and listened to her handle it with the controlled efficiency of someone who'd been managing crises longer than most people recognized crises were happening. She was 3 calls deep by the time they arrived at the office. And by the 4th call, when she spoke with a woman named Irene, who appeared to be the most significant of her lead investors, her voice had shifted into something steady and unhurried that communicated, I am not rattled, without ever saying it. He waited outside the building for an hour in case she needed to be driven anywhere. She came back out at 9:45, not rattled, though he could see in the small muscles around her eyes what the morning had cost her. She got in the back seat and said, Irene is fine. She's been in this industry long enough to recognize a planted column. The other 2 are going to need a call next week, but they'll hold. Good. It's not good. It's managed. There's a difference. What's the difference? Good means it didn't happen. Managed means it happened and I'm still standing. She looked at her hands. I'm tired of managing things that shouldn't require management. He pulled out into traffic. She was quiet for the length of 2 city blocks. And then she said without preamble, he's not going to stop. As long as we're... She stopped. As long as this is visible, he has leverage. I know that. I want you to know that I know that. And I'm not interested in invisible. She said it quietly, but without hesitation. I already did 4 years of invisible, in different ways. I'm not doing it again. He was quiet for a moment, then, I wasn't asking you to. I know you weren't. I'm telling you my position in case you were thinking about volunteering to be invisible on my behalf. She looked at the mirror with the directness that still surprised him sometimes. Don't. All right. I mean it. I know you do, he said, and he did. The conversation he'd been dreading happened on a Thursday evening in the 2nd week of December. He told Chloe only the basic version of events, that Vanessa was a client who had become a friend, which was true as far as it went, and which Chloe had accepted with the same pragmatic assessing look she applied to most information, storing it somewhere internal to be examined later. But Chloe was 8 and observant, and she had her mother's eyes, and she'd already identified months ago that Vanessa was different from other clients, so the friend explanation had only ever bought him a limited amount of time. Time ran out on a Thursday. He'd made pasta, the good kind, from the box with the nest-shaped noodles that Chloe liked. And Vanessa was there, as she'd been on 4 or 5 Thursday evenings over the past few weeks, because she'd said once that his apartment on a Thursday evening was the only place in the week where she felt like she could actually stop moving, and he'd told her the door was open and meant it. She'd brought the good bread from the bakery 2 blocks from her office, which had become an unofficial contribution, and she and Chloe were arguing about the bread-to-pasta ratio, a debate that had been ongoing for 3 visits now, with Chloe maintaining that bread was a meal category separate from pasta and should be consumed independently, and Vanessa holding that bread existed to accompany things and not as a standalone food. Bread is its own food group, Chloe said. Bread is a side. Bread has its own aisle. Cereal has its own aisle, and cereal is not its own food group. Chloe considered this with the expression of someone who'd been outmaneuvered by logic and wasn't happy about it. Cereal is different. How? Because cereal is breakfast, and breakfast is a meal category. Bread is anytime food. That actually supports my point, Vanessa said. Chloe opened her mouth, reassessed, and redirected. Dad, tell her. I'm not getting involved, he said. You're involved by default. You made the pasta. The pasta is neutral. Nothing is neutral, Chloe said, with the certainty of someone who'd gotten that particular line from too many Mrs. Okafor speeches and didn't yet realize it. Vanessa caught his eye over Chloe's head with that specific look that meant she was holding a laugh somewhere in the vicinity of her sternum. He looked back at her with the same quality of restrained amusement, and something moved between them in that glance that was quiet and easy and had become, over the past weeks, its own kind of language. Chloe saw it. She looked at Vanessa, then at her father, then back at Vanessa with the slow, deliberate assessment of someone recalibrating. Dinner went on normally after that. The bread debate concluded in a détente neither side was fully satisfied with. He washed dishes while Vanessa and Chloe started a puzzle on the coffee table. A 500-piece landscape that Chloe had declared too easy and which had been sitting partially completed on the coffee table for 6 weeks because it was actually not too easy. At 8:30, he sent Chloe to get ready for bed, which produced the standard 7-minute negotiation about whether she could have 10 more minutes, which she lost, and which ended with her disappearing down the hall. Vanessa was sorting puzzle pieces by color when Chloe reappeared in her pajamas, hair still unbrushed, standing in the doorway with the look she got when she was working up to something. "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" she asked. Noah, at the kitchen sink, went very still. Vanessa set down a puzzle piece. She turned to look at Chloe without any visible flinching, which he noted and appreciated. "What made you think about that?" she asked. "The way you looked at each other at dinner." Chloe said it plainly, not accusatory. It was the same way Destiny's parents look at each other. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. She glanced toward the kitchen, at Noah, who had turned from the sink and was watching and not rescuing her, because this was her answer to give or not give, and he wasn't going to take it from her. "I think so," Vanessa said. "But that's also something your dad should probably be part of this conversation." Chloe turned to Noah. "Are you her boyfriend?" He dried his hands on the kitchen towel and walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. "Come sit for a second," he said. Chloe sat beside him. Vanessa stayed in her spot on the floor, cross-legged, watching. "Yeah," he said. "Vanessa and we're figuring out what we are to each other, but it's real and important." He looked at Chloe. "Is that okay with you?" Chloe was quiet for a moment, which was one of her tells. She was working something out. She looked at Vanessa with that unsettling directness. "Do you like my dad because he's nice or because he's actually a good person?" she asked. "Because sometimes people are nice but they're not good." Vanessa blinked once, then, "Both. But mostly the second one." "How do you know the difference?" "Because nice people are nice to everyone. Good people are specifically careful with the people they're responsible for." She held Chloe's gaze evenly. "Your dad is careful with you, that's how I know." Chloe turned this over. "Okay," she said. She looked at Noah. "Can she come to my winter concert?" He looked at Vanessa. She had the expression of someone who'd prepared for a hard conversation and had gotten a different one entirely and was still adjusting. "If she wants to," he said. "I want to," Vanessa said. Chloe stood up. "Okay." She looked at Vanessa one more time. "The bread thing. I was right." "You were not." "Dad, tell her." "Bed," he said. Chloe went to bed. He and Vanessa sat for a moment in the quiet aftermath. "She's terrifying," Vanessa said, not with complaint. "I know." I mean that as a compliment." "I know that too." He looked at her. "You okay?" She asked if I knew the difference between nice and good. She laughed quietly, in the way she laughed when something hit her sideways. "I've spent 4 years not being able to answer that question, and an 8-year-old just..." She shook her head. "Yeah, I'm okay." She picked up a puzzle piece. "I'm good." The situation with Marcus came to a head on a Monday. She hadn't told him it was going to happen that day. She'd known the lawyers were moving, but she'd kept the timeline close, which he understood. She didn't share everything with him, and he didn't expect her to. She had a company to run and a legal strategy to execute, and she was, at her core, someone who processed things privately and came to him after, not during. What he didn't expect was to be in the middle of it. He was picking her up at a restaurant in Midtown where she'd had a lunch meeting with 2 members of her product team. He was outside, engine running, when she came through the restaurant's front door at the same moment that a town car pulled up from the opposite direction and Marcus Hale got out of it. Noah saw it from inside the Lincoln. He was 30 feet away and had a clear line of sight. Marcus was taller than Noah had pictured from the description she'd given, broad-shouldered in the way of someone who'd played sport in college and kept the frame without the conditioning, his suit expensive and his expression carrying the particular confidence of a man who was used to controlling rooms by existing in them. He saw Vanessa on the restaurant steps, and he stopped, and for a moment it looked entirely accidental. A coincidence. Terrible timing. It wasn't accidental. Noah understood that immediately. Marcus said something to her. She stopped walking. Her posture changed. Not a collapse, not even a step back, but the quality of stillness she got when she was running very fast calculations. He got out of the car. He didn't run. He walked at a pace that covered ground without broadcasting itself, and he came up alongside Vanessa on the sidewalk and said simply, "Ready?" Marcus looked at him. The look was brief, complete, and carried a great deal of intentional information. It was the look of a man taking a measure and deciding the measurement came up short. "Noah Bennett," Marcus said, in a voice with a smile built into it. "The driver." He said the second word lightly, conversationally, without edge, which was the point. Edge would have been gauche. This was the version that said the same thing while leaving its hands clean. Noah looked at him without expression. "I don't believe we've been introduced," he said. "Marcus Hale." He put his hand out. The handshake was firm and slightly too long, another piece of information. "I've read about you." "I'm sure." Noah kept his voice level. He wasn't angry. Anger would have given Marcus something to use. "I was just telling Vanessa," Marcus turned back to her with an ease that was entirely performed, "the column last week. I want you to know that wasn't from my team. There are people involved in all of this who have their own interests, and sometimes—" "Marcus," Vanessa said, "I'm being honest. I know how it looks, but—" "Marcus." Her voice was quiet and had nothing underneath it. Not heat, not pain, not the residue of 4 years, just a person speaking someone's name as a period at the end of a sentence. "We're done talking. Whatever you need to communicate goes through my lawyers." She turned to Noah. "Let's go." She walked to the car and got in. Noah looked at Marcus for one moment before following her. Not a challenge, not a performance, just the steady, unimpressed look of someone who'd already sized up the room and found it smaller than advertised. He got in the car and pulled away from the curb. She sat in the back seat with her hands in her lap. He gave her a full city block before he said anything. That wasn't accidental. "No?" Flat. "His lawyer is 2 blocks from that restaurant. He times things." "I know." He drove. "Are you all right?" "Yes." A pause. "I keep expecting it to be harder, seeing him." She looked at her hands. "It's not. It's just exhausting. That he still has this much energy for it." She looked up. "He looked at you like you were furniture." "I know." It didn't bother me," he said. "I know what he was doing. It's a move." He kept his eyes on traffic. "He needed me to feel small so that you'd feel the gap. I've met people like him. They're very good at it." She was quiet. Then, "You're very good at not reacting." "I've had practice." He changed lanes. "My daughter's told me I need to work on my emotional expression on multiple occasions." She made the sound that was the cousin of a laugh. "Chloe thinks you should be more expressive?" "She thinks I think too much when I should feel more." He paused. Her words. She was quoting Mrs. Okafor, apparently. Mrs. Okafor has thoughts about everything. "She does." He glanced in the mirror. "She's not wrong, though." 3 days later, Vanessa called him at 9 in the morning with a different quality in her voice. Lighter, with something underneath it that took him a second to identify as relief. "The lawyers filed this morning," she said. "The texts, the financial documentation, the communications with his contact at the investment firm. All of it." A pause. "It's out of my hands now. The legal process runs and I wait." "How do you feel?" "Like I put down something very heavy." She exhaled. "Like I've been carrying A shape I couldn't put down because I didn't know where to set it, and now there's a place for it. Good. There's still the funding round. Halcyon, 6 weeks. She said it not with dread, but with the focused energy of someone who'd cleared one obstacle and could now see the next one clearly. The board is solid. David is solid. The product roadmap is the strongest it's ever been. She paused. I'm good. I think I'm actually good. He smiled at that, and she couldn't see it, which felt like the right proportion. Come to dinner on Thursday, he said. Is this a standing invitation now? Chloe will be disappointed if you don't. Is it just Chloe who'll be disappointed? He looked at the ceiling of his apartment where he'd spent a lot of time looking in the past 2 months. No, he said, not just Chloe. Thursday, she said, I'll bring the bread. Chloe's going to tell you again that you're wrong about bread. Chloe is wrong about bread. I know, he said, but don't tell her that. She laughed. The full one, the real one, the one that arrived without permission and changed her voice entirely. He'd heard it enough times now that he knew its particular shape. It still got him every time. One more thing, she said as she was about to hang up. What? I've been thinking about what Chloe said, about nice versus good. A pause. I want you to know that what she said, what I told her, I meant it. I wasn't just managing a hard conversation with an 8-year-old. Her voice was steady and careful in the way that meant she'd thought about this before saying it. You're careful with people. You're careful with me. And I've had enough of the opposite to know what it costs and what the difference is worth. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. Do you? He thought about the folder of paperwork still on his desk. He thought about a November morning when he'd almost talked himself out of calling her back. He thought about 3 days of missed calls and a ceiling that had nothing useful to say on the subject. I'm working on knowing it, he said. That's the honest version. A pause. That's good enough, she said. Work on it. He said he would. The winter concert was on a Friday evening at Crestwood Elementary in the multi-purpose room that doubled as a gymnasium, which smelled like floor wax and those orange peanut butter crackers that schools seemed to purchase in unlimited quantities. The folding chairs were arranged in 8 rows of 10, and by 6:55 every chair was full and there were parents standing along the back wall and someone's toddler was crying in the corner with the focused commitment of a child who'd decided on a position and was seeing it through. They arrived together. He didn't think much of that until he noticed 2 parents he recognized from the school pickup line track them with the quiet attention of people assembling information. And then he thought of it and decided he didn't mind. Vanessa had worn jeans and a dark coat and her hair down and no visible trace of the Vanessa Sterling of business publications. She'd asked him in the car what you wore to an elementary school concert, and he'd said whatever's comfortable, and she'd said that doesn't help. Noah, with the specific exasperation of someone who'd spent 30 years dressing for specific contexts and was genuinely uncertain how to dress for a room with no agenda. She looked fine. She looked like herself, which was better. They found 2 seats in the 3rd row. She sat with her coat folded in her lap and looked at the risers where the 3rd and 4th graders were assembling in a way that suggested the word organized was being used loosely. Chloe found them from the riser with the directional attention of a person who knew exactly where to look and had looked there first. She gave a small wave, not the enthusiastic kind, the cool kind, the kind that meant I see you and I'm choosing to acknowledge you, but I have a reputation to maintain. Vanessa waved back with the same calibrated restraint, which made him want to laugh out loud. The concert was 34 minutes long. It included 2 songs that the children sang in approximate unison. One song that had a movement component that went sideways in the middle when 2 kids in the 2nd row disagreed about which direction to turn, and a solo by a boy named Trevor, whose voice cracked on the high note in a way that produced the specific combination of wincing and applause that only elementary school concerts could generate. Chloe sang. She knew the words. She did the movements correctly both times because she had practiced them with the methodical intensity she brought to things she cared about, and because she had not wanted to discuss the possibility of turning the wrong way in public. At the end, when the kids came off the risers and flooded toward the parent section in the particular chaos of 34th graders who'd been standing still for 30 minutes, Chloe arrived in front of them with a directness that bypassed Noah entirely and looked at Vanessa. "Did you see the part where Trevor went wrong on the note?" she asked. "I did. I was standing right next to him." She delivered this with the gravity of someone who'd narrowly survived something. Both times in rehearsal, he was fine. "Pressure does things," Vanessa said. "I know, I wasn't going to say anything about it." "That was kind of you." "He knows," Chloe said. "I didn't need to tell him he knows." Vanessa looked at her for a moment. "You're a good person, Chloe." Chloe received this without false modesty, but without performance either. "I know," she said, in the flat, factual way she stated things she believed. Then she turned to Noah. "Can we get hot chocolate? The PTA is selling it in the hallway." "Yes." She was already moving. They followed her into the crowded hallway and stood in the hot chocolate line behind 7 other families. And Chloe talked without pause about the rehearsal process, and Trevor's note, and the fact that Destiny had learned all the lyrics 2 weeks before anyone else because she'd listened to the recording every night. And this was, Chloe acknowledged, impressive, even though Chloe had also known the lyrics, she just hadn't listened to the recording specifically. At some point in the middle of this, Vanessa's hand found his. Not a grand gesture, just her hand in his, fingers loose, the way people held hands when they decided the pretense of almost but not quite was over. He held her hand back, and they stood in the hot chocolate line in a school hallway that smelled like floor wax and listened to Chloe explain the structural differences between memorizing lyrics phonetically versus understanding their meaning. And it was nothing extraordinary, and it was entirely ordinary, and it was the best thing he could remember feeling in a long time. Chloe got her hot chocolate. She turned around with it carefully and looked at the two of them, his hand and her hand, and then looked up at their faces, and something in her 8-year-old expression went quietly, privately satisfied, in the way of someone who has suspected something for a long time and has finally been proven right. She said nothing about it. She turned back toward the gymnasium. "They're doing the slideshow now," she said. "There's a picture of me in it from the fall project. I look okay in it." She walked ahead. He looked at Vanessa. She was already looking at him. That same look from across the dinner table weeks ago, the one that needed no translation. "She's going to be insufferable about being right," he said. "She was right," Vanessa said. "I know. So she should be insufferable about it." He shook his head. She kept his hand. They went to watch the slideshow. The Halcyon funding round closed on a Thursday in late January, and Vanessa called him from the office at 6:47 in the evening, with the particular quality of voice that came after a long fight finally landed in your favor. "It closed," she said. "I know. David texted me." A pause. "David texted you?" He said, and I'm quoting, "She did it. Tell her to go home." She laughed. The real one. The unguarded one. He could hear the exhaustion underneath it, the weeks of board calls and investor dinners and careful language, and the Halcyon team's finance director who'd asked, twice, in separate meetings, whether Vanessa's personal situation had stabilized enough for a long-term commitment. She'd answered both times with the measured precision of someone who'd decided that the question deserved an answer and not the contempt it had actually earned. "He shouldn't be texting my—" She stopped. "My what? What are you to me, officially?" "You can call me whatever you want." "That's not an answer. It's a flexible answer." "Noah." "Vanessa." A beat. He could hear her sitting down, the specific sound of her chair in her office, which he'd been in enough times now to know by its acoustics. "Come get me," she said. "I don't want to be in this building anymore tonight." He was there in 20 minutes. She came out of the lobby in her coat with her bag over one shoulder and her hair down, and the look she had at the end of days that had cost something. Not broken, just emptied out in the way of a person who'd given everything the day required and had nothing left to perform. She got in the back seat and didn't say anything for the first 3 blocks, which was its own form of trust by now. The silence between them had long stopped being uncomfortable and had become something else, a shared space they both knew how to live in. "Chloe's at the Okafors until 8, he said. "Mrs. Okafor lets students come to her house?" They're neighbors. Chloe and her daughter have been friends since kindergarten. He turned onto the river road out of habit. It was their road. He'd started to think of it that way without deciding to. She does homework there on Thursdays when I have late pickups. Does Mrs. Okafor teach her philosophy there too, or just at school? Both, I think. Last week, Chloe came home and told me that integrity was doing the right thing when nobody was watching. He paused. Then she told me she'd taken 2 extra crackers from the lunch table because she was hungry and nobody saw her. I told her that seemed like a failure of the integrity principle. She said the principle didn't apply to crackers. Vanessa was quiet for a second, and then she laughed for a full 10 seconds. The kind of laugh that had been sitting in her chest all day waiting for the right key. He let it run. When she stopped, she said, "I don't know how you do it." "Do what?" "All of it. Work. Her. This." She gestured vaguely at the car, at him, at the general shape of their situation. "You make it look like it fits." "It doesn't always fit," he said. "Tuesday I burned dinner and forgot she had a library book due, and she wore the same socks 2 days in a row because I didn't get to the laundry." "You forgot about a library book. It's $1.50 in fines." "The point isn't the fines." "I know what the point is," he said. "The point is it doesn't always fit. I'm just—" He looked at the river through the windshield, the winter version of it, dark and cold and moving anyway. "I'm in it. That's all. Fitting is overrated. Being in it is what matters." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the water. "Being in it," she said. "Yeah." The legal resolution with Marcus came in February, quieter than anyone who'd watched the beginning of it might have expected. His lawyers accepted a settlement that included a non-disclosure agreement, a full withdrawal of any claim against Vanessa's assets, and a formal termination of every joint financial arrangement they'd held. He did not get the 20% equity position he'd spent 4 years angling toward. He got a number that was, according to Vanessa's attorney, in a call she'd relayed to Noah afterward, significantly less than what his original scheme had anticipated, and which had been structured specifically to reflect the reduced leverage of a man whose documented communications had made their way into a legal brief. She told Noah about it on the phone, sitting in her apartment, which she'd now fully reclaimed, new furniture in the places where his things had been, a repainted wall in the bedroom that she'd chosen a color for on a Sunday afternoon with Chloe, who had opinions about paint that she delivered with the confidence of someone who'd been in the industry for years. "It's done," she said. "How do you feel?" She thought about it, genuinely, not reflexively. "Like it was never actually about him," she said. "The whole thing. It was always about the version of myself that let it happen for 4 years. And I don't know if a settlement changes that, but it closes something. The legal part closes. The rest closes on its own schedule," he said. "Is that from a book?" "It's from 6 years of trying to figure out why my daughter's mother left and never getting an answer that helped, and eventually deciding the answer was less important than what I did next." A long pause. "Noah." "Yeah." "I'm glad you knocked on that door." He looked at the kitchen ceiling. "I'm glad you opened it." "I almost didn't." "I know. You've told me." "I'll probably keep telling you." "That's all right," he said. "I'll keep being glad." What? Spring arrived the way it usually did in the city. Not with ceremony, just with the slow shift of temperature and the appearance of people on stoops who hadn't been there for 3 months, and the smell of something thawing that you couldn't name specifically. Chloe announced in March that she wanted a bicycle, having decided over the winter that she'd been dependent on being driven places for too long, and intended to develop independence by April. Noah told her that independence was a good goal, and that independence cost $230 at the sporting goods store on 5th. And Chloe said she would earn it, and she spent 3 weeks walking Mrs. Chen's dog from the 6th floor for $5 a trip before admitting that the math wasn't working in her favor, and perhaps she would accept a birthday advance. The bicycle became a joint operation. Vanessa contributed over Noah's initial and ultimately unsuccessful objection, a helmet with a pattern on it that Chloe had identified from a website and declared the right one with the certainty of someone who'd done extensive research. He'd objected on principle, not because of the money exactly, but because he was still working out, in the private accounting he kept of things that mattered, what it meant to let someone give things to his daughter without being certain of how permanent that person would be. Vanessa had heard the objection, let him make it fully, and then said, "I'm not buying her love, Noah. I already have her. I'm buying her the helmet she wanted because she did the work of researching the right one, and she should have it." He couldn't argue with that. He'd tried, and she'd waited him out with the patience she deployed when she'd already won an argument and was simply allowing the other person to complete their loop. The helmet was the right one. Chloe wore it on every ride without being asked, which suggested she actually liked it rather than tolerating it, which in the taxonomy of 8-year-old opinion was the highest available rating. He taught her to ride in the parking lot behind the school on a Saturday morning, or rather, he ran alongside her and she taught herself while he served as a spotter and an emergency brake in an audience. She fell twice. The first time she cried, which she would have denied if asked. The second time she got up before he reached her and said, with her jaw set in a way he recognized, "I'm fine. Don't make it a thing." He stepped back and let her make it not a thing. By the end of the second hour, she was riding in a straight line for 50 feet at a time, and by the end of the third, she was turning, and somewhere in the middle of the fourth hour, she was riding in circles around him with the particular expression of someone who had decided a skill was owned rather than borrowed. Vanessa was there for the fourth hour. She'd shown up with coffee for him and a bottle of water for Chloe and stood at the edge of the parking lot in her Saturday clothes, watching Chloe ride with the expression he'd come to know, the one she didn't know she was making, that had nothing polished about it, just someone watching something that moved them in a way they hadn't fully anticipated. "She's fast," Vanessa said. "She's fearless," he said, which was not the same thing but was also true. "She get that from you?" He watched Chloe take a wide turn at the far end of the parking lot, leaning into it with the instinctive recalibration of someone who'd already internalized the physics. "She gets it from herself," he said. "I'm a fairly cautious person." "I know," she said. "It's one of the things I—" She stopped. He looked at her. "One of the things?" he said. She looked back at him with the particular expression she got when she'd said more than she'd planned to and was deciding whether to retrieve it or leave it. She left it. "One of the things I like about you," she said, "you think before you go. Most people in my world go first and think later and leave the mess for someone else." She looked back at Chloe. "You think, and then you go anyway." He was quiet for a moment. "That's one of the nicest things anyone said to me," he said. "Don't let it go to your head." "I'll try." "Noah." "Yeah. I want to tell you something, and I need you to not deflect it or qualify it or find a reason it's more complicated than it is." He turned to face her fully. She was still watching Chloe, but her jaw had the set of someone building to something. "Okay," he said. "I'm in love with you." She said it to the middle distance. "I've known it for a while. I wasn't going to say it until I was sure I wasn't saying it for the wrong reasons. Not because of what you did in October, not because of what the last 6 months have been, not as some—" She stopped. "Not as a reaction. I wanted it to be a thing I knew clearly on its own." She finally turned to look at him. "And I know it clearly." "So." He looked at her. The morning was cold and bright, and Chloe was somewhere behind him on a bicycle. And he thought about a door in a cathedral corridor and a pier over a gray river and 7 missed calls and a ceiling that had never once given him a useful answer. "I love you too," he said. "Have for a while." "How long?" "The hot chocolate line at the winter concert." She blinked. "That was 2 months ago." "Approximately." "You've been sitting on this for 2 months." "I was waiting until I could say it and mean it the full way," he said. "Not the half-afraid version." She looked at him for a moment. "Are you afraid now?" He thought about it honestly. "A little," he said, "but the right amount." She laughed at that. Short, genuine, the kind that acknowledged something true rather than dismissing it. Then she reached out and straightened the lapel of his jacket, which didn't need straightening, just as something to do with her hands, and he caught her hand in the middle of the gesture and held it there for a moment before letting go. From across the parking lot, Chloe shouted, "Are you watching? Look at this turn!" They both looked. She executed the turn with the theatrical commitment of someone who'd been practicing secretly and was now performing a debut. When she came out of it and the bicycle stayed upright, she raised both arms briefly before grabbing the handlebars again, which was a confidence level that he suspected would get her in trouble eventually and which he loved completely. "I watched," Vanessa called back. "What did you think?" Chloe demanded. 8 out of 10. 8? The arm raise at the end was showboating. Showboating is the whole point. Vanessa looked at him sideways. 9, she revised, loud enough to carry. Chloe accepted this and rode off in another circle. It was April when Vanessa told him about the foundation. She'd been working on it since February, quietly, in the margins of everything else, building the structure before she told anyone what she was building. She told him on a Thursday evening, at the kitchen table, after Chloe had gone to bed, with a folder open between them and the particular focused attention she brought when something mattered enough to be nervous about. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said, "about the plan, how it doesn't always survive contact with the actual life." "I said that?" "On the pier, 11 days after the wedding." She looked at the folder. "You said you'd had a plan and it fell apart, and you had to decide whether that was failure or just a different path." He remembered. "I've been thinking about how many people are making that decision alone," she said. "Single parents specifically. The math is brutal. One income, non-negotiable childcare costs, limited flexibility, and every professional development opportunity built for people who have backup." She opened the folder. "The Bennett Foundation for Working Families. I've been talking to employment attorneys, HR specialists, a nonprofit tax attorney. It's real. The structure works. The funding is secured from Sterling Tech's community investment budget." She looked at him. "I want you to run it." He looked at the folder, then at her. "Me," he said. "You." "I drive people for a living." "You drove me for a living," she said. "Before that, you spent 6 years being the entire support system for a child, managing a schedule that required professional-grade logistics every single day, and building the kind of judgment about what people actually need, not what looks good on paper, that I don't know how to teach anyone." She held his gaze. "I'm not doing you a favor. I need someone who understands the problem from the inside. You understand it better than anyone I could hire. I don't have a degree in nonprofit management. I have a team of people who do. I need a director who knows what the work actually is." She paused. "The salary is real. The role is real. I had the job description reviewed by 3 employment attorneys so that nobody could ever argue this was anything other than a professional appointment made on professional merit." She closed the folder. "Which it is." He sat with it. He looked at the table. He thought about the folder of business license paperwork in his desk drawer, still in the state it had been in for 9 months, half-started and set aside for reasons that had seemed like practicality and had probably been fear. "The plan was supposed to be my own car service," he said. "I know. That was the thing I was building toward." "I know that too." She folded her hands on the table. "This is a different plan. It's not smaller. I'd argue it's bigger." She paused. "But it's yours to decide." He looked at her. This woman who had rebuilt everything 3 times in 6 months and hadn't asked for credit on any of it, who had named a foundation after his family without making a production of the gesture, who had stood in his parking lot on a Saturday morning and said, "I'm in love with you," to the middle distance because she wanted it to be a real thing and not a performance. "I'd need to understand the full scope," he said, "before I say yes." "Of course. And I want input on the criteria. Who gets served? How it actually works for people who need it, not just what sounds good in the grant application." "That's exactly why I want you," she said. "And I'll still drive sometimes. Not for income, just, I like driving." She looked at him for a moment. "Nobody's taking your car, Noah." He almost smiled. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" "Yeah." He looked at the folder. "Okay." She let out a breath that she'd been holding longer than the conversation, he suspected. The held breath of someone who'd spent weeks building something and hadn't known until this moment whether it would land. "Good," she said. Then quieter. "Good." The announcement was in May. Vanessa had organized it with the precision she brought to everything that mattered. A morning event at the Sterling Tech offices, employees and key investors, and a small number of press who'd been selected with the specific intention of getting a clean signal out rather than a noisy one. David Park had coordinated logistics. The stage in the main conference space was simple: a podium, the Sterling Tech logo, and 2 chairs for the panel discussion that would follow. Noah had worn a suit. Chloe had reviewed it and said it was good, but that he should lose the tie, which she delivered with the authority of someone whose sartorial opinions had evolved considerably in the last year. He'd kept the tie because he was an adult and it was his suit, and also because Vanessa had texted him that morning. "The tie is right. Don't let her talk you out of it." He suspected Chloe had texted Vanessa first. He had no proof. He was not nervous exactly. He was something adjacent to nervous, alert, present, standing with the particular stillness he had when things were actually important rather than just stressful. The room filled around him. He stood near the back, next to David Park, who was a compact, practical man who had run Vanessa's finances for 4 years, with the loyalty of someone who'd seen the company through 3 difficult pivots and had decided Vanessa Sterling was worth staying for. "She's been working on this since February," David said, not looking at Noah, watching the room. "I know. She called me the day after Valentine's Day and said she had an idea and needed the structure to be airtight." He paused. "I've worked with her for 4 years. When she says she has an idea and she wants it airtight, you don't ask how big the idea is. You start building the container." Noah looked at him. "Did you know it was going to be this?" "Not exactly. I knew it was going to be for someone she trusted." He finally glanced at Noah. "She doesn't trust many people. And the ones she trusts completely. It's not a partial thing with her." "No," Noah said. "It's not." Vanessa came in from the side entrance at 7 minutes past 9, and the room changed the way rooms changed when the person who ran everything walked in, not dramatically, just a quiet shift of attention, a collective orientation. She was in a charcoal blazer and dark slacks and the flat shoes she wore when she was going to be standing for a while. And her hair was back but not tightly, the way she wore it when she was herself rather than performing herself. She stopped and found him across the room. One look, 5 seconds, direct, the look that had no professional distance left in it. Then she walked to the podium. She was a very good public speaker. He'd known this from her reputation before he'd seen it in person. And in person it was different from the articles about it because the articles described her control and her precision and the way she held a room, and all of that was accurate, but what they didn't describe was the thing underneath it, the place where you could see she actually meant what she said, which was rarer than anyone who'd heard a lot of speeches would expect. She spoke about Sterling Tech, about what the company had been built on. Not capital, not market timing, but the specific conviction that useful technology solved real problems for real people, and that the companies that forgot that eventually built things nobody needed. She spoke about the last year, which she addressed directly and without the careful omission that public figures usually used when editing their own stories. She said that she had learned in the last 8 months what it cost to have your foundation removed without warning and what it meant to rebuild, and that the rebuilding had shown her things she hadn't been able to see from her previous position. Then she introduced the Bennett Foundation. She described it with the specific, detailed language of someone who'd spent weeks making sure every element was real and not ceremonial. The Employment Partnership Program, the Flexible Career Development Grants, the Child Care Cost Support Structure, the Mentorship Pipeline connecting single parents to professionals in fields they were trying to enter. She described the criteria. She described the application process. She described the 3 families who had already been selected for the pilot cohort and what their situations were, without identifying them, and something in the room shifted when she described a man raising 2 daughters alone who'd been working toward a licensed electrician certification for 3 years and kept having to pause it, and who would complete it in June with foundation support. Then she said, "The director of this initiative is someone who came into my life at a moment when I needed to believe that decency existed in forms I hadn't been looking for. He understands this work because he has lived it, as a parent, as a person building a life one careful decision at a time, and as someone whose judgment I trust more than I can reasonably explain in a press release." A small, contained laugh moved through the room. "Noah Bennett," she said, "will lead this work." He walked to the podium. He was not a public speaker. He hadn't prepared a speech, because every version he'd written in his head in the week leading up to this had sounded like something someone else would say. So he stood at the podium and looked at the room and said what was actually true. "I'm not going to pretend I know how to run a foundation," he said. "I know how to drive, and I know how to raise a kid, and I know what it costs to try to do both while also trying to build something for the future, and I know that the thing you need most during that time is almost never money. It's someone believing you're worth the investment." He paused. "That's what this is. That's what I know how to do. Everything else I'm going to learn." It wasn't long. It wasn't polished. A woman in the third row was nodding before he'd finished the second sentence, the slow, specific nod of someone who recognized something from the inside. After, there was a panel discussion and then a reception, and both of them had to be present in the professional way for 90 minutes, moving through conversations about the foundation and the funding and the pilot program. He was not practiced at this, at working a room, at the specific social architecture of an event like this. But he was practiced at listening, and listening turned out to be most of what was required. At one point, he looked across the room and found her managing 3 conversations simultaneously with the composed efficiency of someone for whom this was second nature. And she was laughing at something a woman near the window had said, a real laugh. And she looked up at that moment and caught him watching. And across 30 feet of crowded room, she gave him the particular look that he'd learned was for him specifically. Not the CEO look, not the public look, just the real one. He looked back. Chloe was not at the event. She was at school, which she had accepted with negotiated conditions. She would be permitted to attend the dinner that evening, she would see all photographs, and she would be given a full accounting of everything that happened in order of importance as rated by Noah. He'd agreed to the first 2 and told her the third one was a lot. He picked her up at 3:15. She got in the back seat. She almost always took the back seat now, with the practiced ease of a child who'd been in and out of this car her whole life, and said, "How did it go?" "Good." "What was the room like?" "Full." "Was Vanessa nervous?" "No." "Were you nervous?" "A little." She processed this. "What did you say?" He told her. She listened with the complete attention she gave things she considered worth listening to, which was not everything but which included most things he said, a fact he didn't take for granted. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "That's good," she said. "That's what you actually think." "That's what I actually think," he agreed. "Some people say different things in front of people than they actually think." "I know." "You didn't do that." "No." She looked out the window at the passing street. "Are we going to have to move?" she said. "If you're doing this new job." "No." "Because I don't want to change schools." "We're not moving. Mrs. Okafor is doing a unit on civic responsibility next semester, and I want to be there for it." "We're staying," he said. "Nothing changes about the apartment, the school, any of that." She nodded, filing it as resolved. Then, "But other things change." It wasn't a complaint. It was the observation of someone taking inventory. "Yeah," he said. "Some things change. Vanessa's going to be around more. She's going to be around more." Chloe looked at him in the mirror with her mother's eyes and her own expression, which was not her mother's at all. It was entirely its own thing, the specific careful intelligence of Chloe Bennett, age 8, who had been watching adults navigate things badly for most of her life and had opinions about it. "That's good," she said. "She argues about real things." "What do you mean?" "Some adults don't argue about real things. They argue about stuff that doesn't matter, so they don't have to talk about stuff that does." She looked back out the window. "Vanessa argues about bread because she actually thinks she's right. It's different." He almost asked her where she'd gotten that distinction from, but he already knew. It was somewhere between Mrs. Okafor's civic unit and her own 8 years of watching, and the particular intelligence that had always been entirely hers. "Yeah," he said. "It's different." The dinner was at his apartment because Chloe had specified this with clarity. Not a restaurant, not Vanessa's place, their place, the kitchen table, the soup pot, the board games. He made the soup again. The real one, from scratch, because some things established themselves as rituals without anyone deciding they should. Vanessa arrived with the bread and was immediately challenged on arrival by Chloe, who had prepared a written argument about the bread debate that she delivered, standing at the kitchen counter with the composure of someone presenting to a board. "Point 1, she began. "Oh, we're doing points," Vanessa said. "Point 1. Bread is categorically distinct from side dishes because it requires no utensils. Neither does a breadstick. A breadstick is a variant of bread and therefore supports my position. That's circular reasoning. Mrs. Okafor says circular reasoning is still reasoning, just inefficient. Mrs. Okafor said that. She said it about something else, but it applies. Noah stirred the soup and did not intervene and did not smile where Chloe could see him doing it. Dinner was long and loud in the specific way of three people who had stopped being careful around each other. Chloe recounted the afternoon at school with her usual editorial license, moving from the civic responsibility pre-announcement to Damien's continued failures as a debater to the fact that Destiny had a loose tooth and was handling it badly. Vanessa contributed observations that arrived at exactly the right moments. Not trying to be funny, just actually paying attention, which was funnier than trying. After dinner, after the dishes, after the second game of sequence in which Chloe won decisively and suspected nothing about the degree to which this had been facilitated, Chloe went to get ready for bed and came back in her pajamas and looked at the two of them on the couch. "Are you going to be here in the morning?" she asked Vanessa. He looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at Chloe without flinching. "Not tonight," she said, "but more mornings than not, going forward, if that's okay with you." Chloe considered this with the full weight of someone to whom the question was actually being given. "You should probably have a drawer," she said. "A drawer," Vanessa repeated, "in the bathroom, for your stuff." Chloe said it with the practicality of someone resolving a logistics problem. "It's annoying when people don't have a place for their things." Vanessa looked at Noah. He was looking at Chloe with the expression he got when she arrived at something he hadn't expected, and which turned out to be exactly right. "I'll work on that," Vanessa said. "The one on the left is mine," Chloe said. "The right one's free. Dad uses the cabinet, but he doesn't need the drawer." "I'll take the right one," Vanessa said. Chloe nodded, satisfied. "Okay." She looked at Noah. "Can she come to the spring fair? Destiny's mom is running the bake table and it's going to be bad because she doesn't actually bake. She buys things and puts them on a plate. And I think we should bring actual things." "What do you want to bring?" "Vanessa should decide. She has more time than you." She looked at Vanessa. "You can bake, right?" "A bit." "I can learn," Vanessa said. Chloe processed this. "Okay, we'll practice." She looked at Noah. "Can we teach her?" "Yes," he said. "Okay." Chloe looked at Vanessa one more time with the clean appraisal she reserved for things she'd decided were real and worth keeping. "Good night." "Good night, Chloe." She went to bed. Noah and Vanessa sat in the quiet that followed, the particular quiet of a house with a child in it who had gone to sleep, warm and inhabited and different from any other kind of quiet. After a while, Vanessa said, "She offered me a drawer." "She did. An 8-year-old just gave me more than most adults have in the last decade." He looked at her. She was looking at the doorway Chloe had disappeared through, and her face had the unguarded quality it got when something had hit the place underneath all the competence. The place that 4 years of Marcus and a canceled wedding and 7 months of rebuilding had left tender but not closed. "She trusts what she sees," he said. "She's always been like that. She doesn't do the thing where she sees something and then talks herself into a different version." "I used to do that," Vanessa said. "I was very good at the different version. I know. I'm not going to do it anymore." "I know that too." She looked at him. "You seem very calm about all of this." "I'm not calm," he said. "I'm present. There's a difference." She absorbed that. "Where'd you get that distinction?" "Someone told me once that fitting is overrated and being in it is what matters." He paused. "I'm trying to take my own advice." She looked at him for a moment, that look, the real one, and then she leaned her head against his shoulder with the particular weight of someone who'd stopped holding themselves at a careful distance. He didn't move. He let her be there. The lamp was on in the corner and the apartment smelled like the soup, and somewhere down the hall, Chloe was either asleep or reading with a flashlight that he'd decided to pretend not to know about. Outside, the city moved. It was April, and the window was slightly open because Chloe had declared the heat too much, and he'd agreed, and now the sound of the street came in, quiet and ordinary. A car passing, someone laughing on the sidewalk, the ambient pulse of a city that had no interest in being dramatic about anything. He thought about a cathedral corridor and a woman holding a phone with white knuckles. He thought about a pier and borrowed clothes and a laugh arriving without permission. He thought about cold coffee and a missing sock, and an 8-year-old who could read him more accurately than most adults. He thought about everything that had not gone according to plan, which was almost all of it, and how the unplanned version had turned out to contain things the plan never would have. That was the thing people didn't say enough about starting over. Not that it was possible, because everyone said that, said it easily, from the comfortable distance of people who hadn't had to do it. What they didn't say was that the new thing didn't look like the old thing, that you didn't rebuild what you had. You found something you hadn't thought to want, in a form you wouldn't have recognized from where you'd been standing before. You had to lose the plan to find the life. That was the part that cost something. And that was also, in the end, the part that mattered. Vanessa shifted slightly and he felt her exhale. One long, slow breath, the kind that came after something had been held tense for a long time and could finally let go. He thought about a drawer in the bathroom and a spring fair and a woman who was going to learn to bake because an 8-year-old had asked her to and she had said yes without hesitation. He thought about the folder on his desk, which he'd finally opened and started filling out last week, and which was not the original plan and was not smaller for that. He thought about being in it. Outside the city. Down the hall, Chloe. Right here, Vanessa. He put his arm around her, and the lamp stayed on, and the window stayed open, and nobody pretended any of it was perfect, which was exactly what made it real.